The Freya album Tides initially kind of pulled my heartstrings with the album art. Again, I'm a sucker for beautiful painted album art, and I initially was like, oh, I want to look at this, and then I decided to actually listen to it. I had not heard of the band before checking out the record. It reminds me of my very favorite Norwegian band ever, Enslaved. Some of their atmospheric passes and some of the galloping structures throughout several of the songs very much remind me of Enslaved, and just kind of take you. I think there's nothing, no matter how many people replicate this sound, to me it never gets old. It never gets old to hear something that sounds like Northern Europe, that sounds like you're standing on a volcano in Iceland, or you're standing in the middle of a black sand beach, or you're looking over a vast tundra plain. Like, some of my favorite travel and some of my favorite season is winter, and some of my most favorite trips have been to that part of the world, and I feel there's such a spirituality to that quietness and that sort of quiet ferocity. So whenever a musical group or a metal album takes me to that place, I'm instantly very, very grateful and sort of reverent, because I do think every single culture and every single part of the world has magnificent, like, inspiring things about it. But as someone who loves winter and someone who just likes quiet and likes to reflect and has just been lucky enough to witness certain parts of these places, it's just, I'm appreciative anytime a musical soundscape takes me back there. So I think a lot of these songs are quite long, but they are journeys. They're individual journeys, and then the whole record is a collective journey. Very, very relaxing, very, very soothing, very beautiful. And I thought many of the bridges in these songs were just like, almost gave me chills, because they were so epic, or they were so well thought out or well crafted. So I really appreciate this record. I appreciate it going into the winter season or kind of into the meat of the winter season after the holidays and everything. And again, the album art is to die for. And I think this band is going to be, well, I'll say I don't know much about this band, but I'd like to keep learning more about them and seeing what other pieces they put out in the future. Beyond Mortal Dreams' record came out in April, The Abomination of the Flames, and this was one of the big moments of the year where I really appreciated some of that more old school death metal technique. What I love about Beyond Mortal Dreams is they utilized those classic death metal tuning and tonality and production without it being too muddy or indistinguishable. And I know in metal world, production is something that people have a lot of different opinions about. For me as a listener, I do prefer slightly clearer production. I totally respect, I know that there's a different impact, and I appreciate and respect the different impacts that can come from more sort of fuzzy or indistinguishable or super mic'd, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Echoey kind of production. I totally get what that's doing. But I love hearing every instrument as clearly and crisply as I can. And I thought that this album reminded me a lot of one of my other favorite death metal bands, Drawn and Quartered, because I feel like Drawn and Quartered also uses and manipulates classic death metal without being super indistinguishable or like so lo-fi that I can't even hear what's going on. So really like this album. The vocals are actually sound almost identical to the vocalist of Drawn and Quartered too. I thought that this was a very dexterous album. Things are going in many different directions, but still contained. It's not completely lost. I thought that Deficit and Flesh had an incredible midsection that was sort of like, kind of took the wind out of me. I was really impressed. They're great. Again, I love my atmosphere. Really nice atmospheric surprises on They Are Seven. And I thought that the Decimation hymn was just one of the most expertly crafted songs, start to finish, that I've heard in a while. So love this album, love getting my feet into some classic death metal sounds with some really nice touches. So A+. Called the Autolith, and I think they're kind of a super group or sort of like a side project band. They didn't strike me as a band that's like maybe been around for a long time, but their record Folium Limina, looking at my notes, that came out this fall was something that took me by surprise and definitely was a knockout for me, and it encompassed everything, not just about fall, but about a beautiful, whole, complete, developed piece of art. I thought it was exquisitely delivered. I thought, the doom metal quality with the fiddles and the atmospheric pieces, again, I'm such an atmosphere freak, with the kind of horror and grief tones were just lovely. I love those types of albums, especially when the summer is ending and we're starting to have shorter days, longer nights. And again, the year I've had, like, themes of sort of melancholy, definitely any music that had that quality certainly helped me with my healing and grieving processes that I did this year. The female vocals were interesting. They sometimes were a tad inconsistent for me, but they didn't take away from anything when they were, which I thought was interesting. It kind of followed in keeping with the music when things would go a bit awry, and I thought that was very interesting. Really loved the wall of sound elements in this album as well. I really enjoy the miking sort of on the fiddles to make everything bigger and more hollow, while at the same time being very full. It was eerie, it was scary, it was autumnal, just an all-out, stunning, knockout, beautiful piece of art, and a fun project. If this group stays together long term, who knows? But I'm here for kind of wherever they go, and I actually am curious to look at some of the original groups that these people belong to more closely as well. I had never heard of the band MWWB. I think it's Mammoth, Weed, Wizard, Bastard. I had not heard of them before. I came upon their 2022 release, The Harvest, but I was blown away and really, really impressed. And it had a lot of, again, elements that I look for when I listen to music. Again, atmosphere is a big thing for me. There's tons of atmosphere, and there's kind of a doomy quality. Excuse me. It makes me think of Devin Townsend, who is, of course, anyone who watches my videos knows that I'm a huge Super Devin Townsend fan. And some bits of this MWWB album reminded me of Ziltoid, the Omniscient, the first one. And there are even moments that I almost hear things that make me think of Annika van Gierksbergen. I think I pronounced that right. The lady who works with Devin a lot and has her own music in her own right. I thought I heard bits of like a Dev and Annika collab throughout this record, and I love a wall of sound moment. I love super layered chord work, and my favorite songs from the record are the title track, The Harvest. I love the song Moonrise. Thought that was stunning, a stunning song. And the songs are long, but they're really, really developed and very, very interestingly composed. And I can really appreciate a long song that has many, many iterations. I'm a really big fan of when BT Bam does that, when other bands do that. So I was really, really impressed by this record. And it came out of nowhere, because again, I've never heard of this band, but I was really, really impressed. And, I have another note that the other woman whose voice I heard a little bit in this record that was kind of exciting. I heard bits that sounded like the, I don't know if she's still the singer of Battlelore, but the woman, Kasia, I believe her name was, the Indonesian, I think, lady who used to be the front singer for Battlelore. I was like, oh, it sounds kind of like her. So kind of great male-female vocal, great wall of sound, great atmosphere, and made me think of Dev and some of his work. So great record. I hope to kind of get more familiar with this band. The Shape of Everything from Sohm This was a really, really solid release, I thought. I thought that it was very, very clear. There was a really clear focus. It was very, very, like, on brand, but still exciting. It was very, very pretty. I thought it was groovy and modern in a way that I always like. It was very fresh. But it reminded me of just a group of folks that really know what they want, really know what they're doing, and deliver something that's just very clear. I feel like I've said clear 80 times, but, you know, very, very focused, very clean, you know, no mistakes. This just felt very, very professional and very, very on top of what they want to be doing. And I just found it to be, I love atmosphere. Atmosphere is one of my top features when I listen to metal or music. I love atmosphere. I like the bits of gent here and there. Really beautiful chord work. I love the chord building. It's very dreamy, you know, it's just, and all-encompassing. When you think about what the shape of everything even means, you know, it sounds just like some esoteric shit that you think of when you're considering a concept like the shape of everything. So enjoyed it very, very much. Very, very solid. My favorite songs on the record are Animals, Moment, Clocks, and Wrong. I think Wrong is my favorite song on the album. So great, solid record. The solo project Nurez, the album Nachtlied, I think. I sing in German sometimes, but it's pardon me. Nachtlied. Beautiful straight away. Kind of like I think about this album and Tomarum in similar terms. More atmosphere, more black metal. This album also reminded me of Enslaved, which for me is like a huge bonus point. If anything's like Enslaved, I'm sure to adore it. Great ambient pieces throughout the journey that we go on. It does feel like a journey. It does feel like traveling through an expansive panoramic experience listening to that, and I find those immersive cinematic type records especially enjoyable. The second track, I don't have it in my notes, but the second track really stood out to me. It had an incredible section that was without vocals. Again, some ambient sections, really, really scoped out and arced out really beautifully, which is hard to do. It's hard to keep people engaged sometimes if there aren't consistent vocals, but I thought that this was really done well. Every song every song is so good. There's not a bad song on the record. There's no break that's like, okay, this was good, this is like a sleeper, and then the rest, like, every song so good. I love the track Die Seele, and I love the track Das Ende, especially. Again, pardon the butchered German pronunciation. And I just appreciated sort of this was a visceral record. I think it's fitting that the album art was red, because there were moments of passion and moments of just very intense emotive sound making that felt very passionate and red. The essence of this album does feel red, so really great work. Thrilled to have discovered another act that I would like to sort of keep up with. I was really excited to see Venom Prison come back. Congrats to Larissa on having her baby. I can only imagine how complicated and sort of exciting and intense it must be to have a baby, period, let alone as a musician and as a metal musician in a pretty male-dominated space. So congrats to her. Erebos is so ambitious and so stylistically mature. I've been watching Venom Prison for several years. I really loved Samsara. That also made my albums of the year list when it came out. So there's some unexpected twists and turns throughout the record that I really appreciate. I really liked hearing some of the clean vocals. I don't recall hearing clean vocals in earlier tracks and albums, so I really appreciated that. I thought that there were some very cool incorporations of electronics and synth too, and that was also something that was kind of part of the ambitious sort of leveling up tonality that I gathered from this record, and I really was very intrigued. My favorite songs from the record are Golden Apples of the Hesperides. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. And Technologies of Death is a brilliant song. So I'm hoping that, as Larissa recovers from the birth and she prepares to come back, I don't know exactly the timing of when her leave and all that and how record labels do that, but I hope that, when they start touring and stuff again, that they have a good time and that all kind of goes well in the next chapter of her life and in their life as a group, because the way this sounds, it's all heading in a really awesome direction. I had the great pleasure of seeing Zeal and Ardor in concert for the very first time this year when they came through North America. I had heard rumblings of him and the music and everything, and I had seen photos of them before, and so I'm always so excited to see another person of color in the metal scene. I know there's tons of us, but it does feel sometimes a little bit like we're not always around as much. So I'm always thrilled for that. But that aside, because that's not everything, the work on the new album, I think it's eponymous. Is it eponymous if it's your name, your band name is the album name? I don't know. But the Zeal and Ardor record of this year is so exciting. It's so industrial. Similarly to some of the other records, cool, awesome, unexpected twists and turns, really experimental bits in the electronic parts. Alright, that's so silly to say. Everything's a lot of it's electronic, but in some of the keys and synths that are brought in, super unexpected, very unpredictable. I found one of the adjectives that kept coming to me on this record was youthful. And I don't mean that in an infantilizing way, because we're all adults and they're all adults, but it sounds like sort of new life, new ideas, very, very much, again, not Gen Z, because he's not Gen Z and they're not Gen Z, but it feels youthful in the sense that it's very unbridled, and it's focused on the future and sort of going forth into a new direction without a whole lot of parameters, which I think is really great for the creative process and just great for the scene and great for art and music in general. So I think there are some fun grooves. I'm just looking at my notes. The atmosphere is fabulous, and I like how the atmosphere at many points is quite sudden. You don't know when it's going to come, and it was quite a ride, and it was quite amazing to witness parts of it live. So congrats. And I'm excited to see where things go in the future. An album that really kicked off the summer in a beautiful way. It's Radiant Bloom by Astronoid. I had never heard of them, like some of the other bands on the list. Hadn't really heard of Astronoid before, but I love shoegaze. Again, as someone who likes atmospheric elements, like shoegaze is a really great subgenre and genre in its own right. And something that stood out to me on Astronoid's album is it had a magical quality to it. It had an ethereal quality to it. And again, more sort of excellent production where you feel the driving beats of the rock and of the metal, but it floats at the same time. Personally, I was having a very difficult time when this album came out, so I had also a connection of wow, the lyrics and the feelings that this album evokes couldn't be more in line with what I'm going through, so I'll always appreciate and remember the album for that reason too. The lyrics are so beautifully crafted. The vocalist, and I think the main composer, I think his name is Brett, his talent shines through and through, as does everybody's. I think the song is Admin, Sleep Whisper, and Drown, phenomenal. Drown is my favorite song on the whole record. It's a complete jam, and it's really a cry for a human cry for help in a way that I think is just it's juxtaposed with the sounds and the words so sort of deliciously. So I saw and felt some sort of neoclassical kind of melodeath things here and there as well. So I just think the magic of the record is so lovely, and the album art couldn't be more fitting as well. I'm also a sucker for album art, so loved discovering this band. I got to see them on tour in 2022, loved seeing them play live, and I hope to kind of follow them into the future. It's so nice to see him unapologetically moving into his next chapter, musically and otherwise. I listened to and got my hands on the deluxe version of Lightwork. I have to tell you, it's wonderful and it's fresh, but it's so him. Like, I think when you look at Reddit pages and you talk to people, and there's always sort of a sentiment with most artists, like, oh, I remember the old days, or oh, I remember Strapping Young Lad, or I prefer this, or I would like him to do this, or so-and-so to sort of incorporate this. But at the same time, it's good when people explore new directions, especially when people have had decades of a career that has spanned so many albums. I mean, Devin has to have put out close to 40 albums by now, so it's like, I'm so happy for him, but it's not to me that drastic of a jump. It's fresh and warm, and some might say especially some of the opening singles maybe are digestible or marketable, but it all sounds just like him. I think there are certain themes he brings back from old records and old songs, certain hemiolas and arpeggios and just like riffs and things and chords that he certainly has brought some stuff back. But even on the tracks that are just new, it sounds just like him. He sounds great. I like that the album has a lot of variation. It's not all the kind of accessible songs, but it's not all dark, but there's a little bit of everything. There are some moments towards the middle and end that are epic and dark, kind of heavy metal pieces that are maybe similar to a Deconstruction or a Ziltoid. Like, there are pieces of that do show up. And then there's moments that are quiet, like Key and Ghost, and I'm just looking. There's some nice, I have some nice notes about the electronic touches. Some sort of like, not quite like that one album he did that was completely ambient, not quite that extreme, but similar things that made me think of that. And I just came away from it feeling so happy for him and grateful that he's back and that he's okay. And you just feel, as always, his unwavering humanity, and that's something you just cannot teach that, and you can't replicate that. And he comes through in that way in person when it's live, and in studio, and in sort of polished final cuts of things. So thrilled for him. I think I liked pretty much all the songs. I especially love Children of God, and there's like 4 or 5 others, but the one I'm currently kind of listening to on repeat is Children of God. So thank you so much, Devin. So glad you're back. And yeah, thrilled that it came out this year and that it's on the list. Yay! Arkaik's new album was my first probably huge like tech death moment of the year, where I was like, all right, let's bring on the tech for the year. There's of course been other tech death that came out before this record, but I was extremely excited about this record. Labyrinth of Hungry Ghosts. Every song was phenomenal. Just kind of like, reviewing tech death is interesting because oftentimes I say the same shit, like, oh, great musicianship, oh, it was really expertly crafted, and the kicks and the double bass is so fast, and some of that. So some of those kind of typical staple compliments for a tech death album stick for me on this record. I really, 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 really loved that in addition to those more basic tech death, like, great features, this record had a really interesting lilt to it that is unusual sometimes for techie music, I think. There are these sort of question-answer passages that I found really, really intriguing throughout several of the songs. I loved Wayward Opulence and some of the major chords that kind of, and the incredibly mind-blowing midsection in that song. I loved the Summon Armoria. There was I thought I heard fiddles and stuff, which was sort of, and some world music touches, and I love world music influences and tidbits throughout metal and rock music. So, and on its own, I love world music as well. So just a beautiful, I mean, it really did feel like the first big tech punch for me for the year, and start to finish. The other song I have, the Orpheon Descent, incredible, great songs, nice peppering of unique things. And again, I love that sort of question answer feel that came throughout. So fantastic work. I was absolutely floored the first time I heard Epigone from Wilderun. I listened to it pretty quickly after it was released in the wintertime, and I almost don't have words for how stunning and beautiful and magnificent this album is. I first was quite taken with the album art. I'm a sucker for album art. I love studying album art and trying to piece together how the composition of the art mirrors or follows the journey and compositions of the album. So I was first like, woo, what is that? There's bubbles, it's kind of rainbow, it's a fair, it's like a woman, like what is going on? And 10 out of 10 on the art alone. I'd hang that piece of art in my house. But just kind of looking at my notes and thinking again about the impact immediately from the beginning of Exhaler to the absolute end. It's cinematic, it's diverse, it's so interesting how some bands can have diverse elements that clash, and others can have diverse elements that absolutely congeal in the most perfect way. And I thought all of the metal, the folk, the acoustics, the clean vocals, the moments of more aggression, stunning, gorgeous, amazing, impactful, powerful. And the words, the lyrics to every song are just incredible. Like it's been a minute since I've read lyrics that are that stunning. And I heard they're up for a Grammy, possibly, which, I know the Grammys are kind of controversial, but I hope they're celebrating that well-earned recognition, if nothing else. And in my notes, I just kind of have the quieter moments of this album make me think of the iconic, or maybe not iconic, but the 1970s band America. But I also feel like I hear bits of Anathema as well, the metal band that I think has disbanded or retired. And then they just sound like them, and an advanced version of them, and other parts as well. So some of my favorite tracks, I love Exhaler, I love Wool Gatherer, I love Passenger, Identifier, Ambition, but really all of it start to finish. Just chef's kiss, absolutely magnificent. Congrats to Wilderun on a spectacular release. Catalyst surprised me with their album this year, A Different Painting for a New World. Similar to some of the other younger bands and some of the themes I've mentioned, this is another example of taking technical progressive musicianship and exploring themes of what has worked in the past and where are we going and what needs to fundamentally be broken down and rebuilt so that we can get there. I'm just coming back to my notes here. I have so many notes. It's hard to keep memories of all of the music and all the song titles and stuff. So anyway, so I have here in my my remembrance and looking at my notes. I have very exciting, very fresh, very new, and I remember knowing immediately this was a tech death kind of space. But there's some groove. There's some groove in here, which I think all of rock and roll has some kind of groove. But I think sometimes with tech death, it's easy to fall into the theory of everything and sometimes the groove, or like maybe the musicality, the musicianship can be really tight, but the musicality can be a little bit stiff. But I thought that in this record, all of it blended together really nicely. It was fun, it was heady, it was complex, but there was a little bit of groove to it, which I really appreciated. Phenomenal tracks that stood out to me are the Catalyst's End. I have Arise of the Anathema was the other song. I was just like, my brain is now in my butt and it's never coming back. And then kind of going in reverse order, the second track, because I think Arise of the Anathema is the 5th track, and then I also really adored the 2nd track, To Unleash Thy Heinous Fate. These songs are not only just like expertly put together, and great sort of choices were made in these songs, but just like, again, the theme, you know, if you don't change what you need to change, and you don't sort of assess what's going to be healthy progress for our human race and for the world, there are heinous consequences, and there are worms and locusts and anathema sort of worst feared scenarios do come up. So I'm not a fan of toxic positivity in the world, so I think when we use art to really just go there and explore like the worst possible scenario, that's just really healing, even if it doesn't come to that for me in my country or you in your country necessarily. There are places where these bad things are happening, you know, and we just institutionally cannot get ourselves together to make things equitable. So, not to be political, but I thought this record was expertly put together and communicates a very, very important message. On Hath's new album, All That Was Promised, they very much impressed me when they first appeared and when they first started releasing things a couple years ago. They have a lovely combination of magnificence and grandeur in their music, and they have this mixing of like a kind of a blackened death, kind of a sludge. There's horror themes, existential crisis type themes, apocalyptic themes, but it just kind of all comes together in this bombastic, technically superior, profound work. So All That Was Promised, lives up to any promises that they may have given or not given. Really, really solid work. I'm just double checking my notes. I loved the intro on The Million Violations. Lithopadic is an incredible song, start to finish. Just a phenomenal track. I have in my notes, like, Lithopadic is a phenomenal track. And I think even the way the album ends on Name Them Yet Build No Monument just leaves a lot of food for thought as you close not just the album, but also this era of life that we are living through. Septicflesh is one of those bands to me that they stick to their brand for the most part, but it's never boring, and they're so excellent at what they do that they can, after decades, make their material sound fresh. So they're one of my favorites, just period. And a year that a new Septicflesh record comes out is a great year, because I can spend hours jamming pretty hard to older stuff by them. So having new material is always just like, yes. So Modern Primitive, excellent, super technical, but really nice mixing as always with the symphonic elements. Hierophant is one of my top tracks of the year for sure. Just checking my notes, what else did I think? I just kind of have, like, it opens with a complete bang, and it gives, like, the boys are back, but not in a bad way, not in a cheesy way, not in a boring way, not in an unexciting way. So I'm just hoping that Septicflesh comes back to North America sometime, because I haven't seen them in many years, and it'd be such a treat to see them again. Whenever I watch live videos of them, I absolutely get chills. So, and the last time I saw them was they got chipped with a stupid, they got chipped with To Me, which was a poor choice, and they gave them the opening slot, and they should have co-headlined. So, just my 2 cents. But modern primitive, exquisite work, and just a joy to finish out the year with. I hadn't heard of the Atlanta, Georgia band Tomarum. I think that's how you say it, Tomarum. I had not heard of them before this year, but I stumbled across their album Ash and Realms of Stone Icons this year. And I knew pretty early on that it would definitely make my album of the year countdown. It has already things that I look for in music and what I really love in music, which of course is atmosphere. It's an atmospheric black metal record, but it's more than just that label. So much of the music I love is more than just the sort of labels we can put or try to put on them. But I have in my notes that it's an atmospheric black metal record with certain death metal percussion and percussive elements. I kind of also commented and noted that this band reminded me of my favorite Norwegian band, Enslaved, if Enslaved was more in the direction of garage, which is kind of a take what you will from that sort of connection that I made. Condemned to a Lie, As Black Forms Grey are wonderful. The songs that immediately stood out to me for just great composition, beautiful elements. I loved, again, the atmosphere, the black metal elements, and those more galloping double bass kicks and things that I like from more of a death metal approach. Superb, and I have here superb musicianship and especially superb percussion throughout. I love strong percussion, and when a record is produced to the point where you can actually hear it and really appreciate it. So big kudos to the production and the percussion. I'm getting stumbled on all these P words. I like that there are some progressive elements thrown in as well. And I just think too, this is a young band, and I think more and more so many young bands are exploring these ideas of really saying goodbye to what we've known systemically and institutionally, knowing that some of that stuff is not applicable in the same way to the era we're heading into. So I thought that, you know, the even title of the album, Ash and Realms of Stone Icons, like kind of destruction and desolation and sort of cleansing and starting over when we're surrounded by these sort of archaic, stalwart things that just seem to persist. Just an interesting thing to kind of think about. So, great album, great arc, great sounds, great soundscapes, and just a 10 out of 10. Oh my god, Empyrean! Oh man. Fallujah, another just, when I think of just top bands for me of my growing up that were not already established bands, like I still think about the Harvest Wombs as my top 2011 album, and I was pretty young back then. And Empyrean is a perfect album, in my opinion. It is perfection start to finish. It has all of the elements that sound so like them. I've heard friends at shows and just industry people in magazines and stuff talk about them as being like a dreamy, kind of atmospheric, progressive, technical death metal, wonderful outfit. And, you know, Empyrean felt like such a survivor's triumph. It reminds me of Rivers of Nile's The Work. That was one of my top albums the year it came out. Not stylistically the same, really. Certainly they each are unique and, you know, cover many different subgenre grounds in their work, which I find super inspiring and I really appreciate. But though the two bands don't totally sound identical, something I remember about The Work coming out was the way the band discussed how broken and how crushed the pandemic made them, and how it took everything in them to put that album out. And that's why I thought it was so brilliant. I know, not to get off on too much of a tangent, I know a lot of fans prefer owls and, you know, love the direction of Owls and maybe were a little disappointed with the direction of the work, but I just so appreciate the humanity of that release and the grit and just the way that it wasn't sort of predictable, because their feelings as human people through that pandemic early period were just completely unpredictable feelings. So I think it's a brilliant album for that. And that's kind of how I feel about the new about Empyrean from Fallujah, even though it is very much, I've heard already fans, in the last few months beaming about it and saying they like it better than some of the other recent releases, and they're back and they're on top of their game. I also remember an Instagram post around the time that that Empyrean came out, and the band was just thanking fans because they expressed a similar thing that Rivers had said of just like, even though it wasn't peak COVID, it was just, they're like, we almost broke up in the last couple years. We're so tired. We've been so beaten down. We're just trying to get ourselves together, and this labor of love was so meaningful because we almost didn't make it, or we almost just were at that point of burnout that was so deeply relatable. Not as a traveling musician, but just in sort of life and COVID and just a lot going on. So like Rivers, I just appreciate the humanity of that type of connection, and the way so many musicians are willing to share that with fans means a lot. And then then the music itself on Empyrean is so beautiful, and they sound so strong, and so that tells me that they literally put their heart, their souls, their blood, sweat, and tears, and that they have risen like the phoenix from the ashes. Even though I loved their last couple albums, I wasn't thinking they were down and out personally, but it's so great to see them just rise and persevere, because I knew in 2011 this was a band to watch, and I hope they're well taken care of it, and they're healthy and able to rest and eat well and stuff, so they can make music for many years to come, because I'm a huge, huge fan, and I have the ultimate respect. So bravo on Empyrean, and just, yeah, I'm just so grateful and thankful that we got to have it this year. Whenever Imperial Triumphant releases something, it's a given that it's going to be, if not the best piece of art for the year for me. It's certainly in the top few. It's just impossible for them to not make that ranking. Not that I'm anybody, but I was thrilled to hear that Spirit of Ecstasy was coming out, but I was baffled that they astound me with how quickly they come out with not just new stuff, but such incredible new stuff. And I feel almost an embarrassment as a fan a little bit, because I'm never like the cool metal fan. I've said that probably before in other intros and things. I'm just not. I'm the goober fan that is so happy to be there. I've always been that way since I was a kid. And I don't help my case of being cool, even as an adult. I can't help it. The stuff, any artist, any musician that plays as well as so many of these bands do, I'm just like a music theory nerd, happy as a clam, like baby when I'm at gigs and so on. So that's how I feel about Spirit of Ecstasy, and I'm embarrassed because I'm so fortunate that they come to my city quite a bit, and the last time I was there, like, I wanted to muster up the courage to go up and say hello at, because a couple of the members were at the bar, and I just couldn't do it because I feel like I'm such a goof. Like, I'm not the cool metal fan, and they are so meticulous and impressive, and they're so totally friendly and everything, but just they're so serious, and the show itself is so intense that I feel like the last thing they want to see is someone run up like, oh my god, it's so good. I'm sure that's the last thing they want to hear. Or maybe not the last thing, but it certainly doesn't fit the brand. So blown away, absolutely, starting with Chump Change all the way through the end. I almost can't even I definitely can't pick a favorite song because the flow is so pristine, and as always, it's so surprising and chaotic, and I just cannot believe I feel like Imperial Triumphant is a once in a generation type experience, and I'm so grateful to be part of that group of fans witnessing them at this time. I certainly didn't know about them until 2018, so I'm kind of late to the ball game, but I'm so thankful I discovered them. I love the opening with Chump Change is phenomenal. I love the arc into Metro Vertigo. I love sort of the ending sort of pieces with Maximalist Scream, and just the whole, it's just such a scary, exciting journey. And I even remember when the Mercurius Gilded video came out, visually that was stunning to me, even though it was just one frame for the whole however many minutes. So we've got technique, theme, uniqueness, quality, great production, great musicianship, incredible story, incredible arc. They're just absolutely pristine to me. So thrilled that it came out, thrilled to have another Imperial album in my collection, and I'm so excited to see what they do next.